this is a pretty extensive presentation, so they should find themselves still engaged and enriched. So this presentation largely focuses on abortion access in Montana in the past, present, and future. So we're going to be looking at a host of different things, and I'm super excited and super grateful to be able to share this space with all of you, and really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to learn about something that we can all know so much more about. Let's see. So the first thing I would like to do is do a land acknowledgement. So you could be watching from wherever, and if you're watching outside of Missoula County, I strongly encourage you to look into the people who have stewarded your land and the indigenous people who were likely forcibly removed from the land of which that you're watching. So here in Missoula, this is the territory of the Salish and Kalispel people. They were forcibly and violently removed from this land to benefit people who look like me. This is extremely complex, particularly on this topic as we talk about autonomy and justice. There are certain individuals we certainly need to center more in this work, and that is so largely BIPOC folks. And that's just super important moving forward. And we'll talk about that throughout this presentation. So about me, I would like to just introduce myself a little bit. The information that we're going to talk about is kind of really difficult and an area that's filled with a lot of deceit and dishonesty, where people are sort of taken advantage and often given misinformation on this topic. So I would hope that you're a little curious about who I am just as I give you this information. But my name is Maggie Bornstein. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm originally from the North Shore of Massachusetts, and I moved to Missoula for college. But I have long been concerned with the realm of reproductive justice, of which we'll get more involved in understanding like what is reproductive justice and how is it different from reproductive rights. But I have consistently volunteered with groups such as Planned Parenthood throughout, gosh, since I was like in late middle school. And so this subject area has always been something that I have worked on in like just my personal life through a volunteer capacity. And it was not until recently that I realized the gravity of this subject until I was in a position myself where I needed to access a safe legal abortion in Montana. So not only do I come sharing from a sort of political perspective of the ways in which I've engaged in this issue, but also like how this has impacted me. And I am very happy to be honest and vulnerable with all of you should you have any questions, either in a professional or like personal sense. So the reproductive justice framework, essentially it moves beyond reproductive rights. So it means it's more a focus on access is the best way that I can put it. Whether you choose to go forward with having a child and become a parent, or if like that is a total great option and should you choose that, you would want to be able to access things like healthcare and clean air and water and food for your child, as well as having the access to good information in terms of however like you want to make that choice. And so people should be able to self-determine, and that is really huge within this reproductive justice framework. It's so much more than just like choice. It's so much about access. And this framework comes from an organization and a coalition called Sister Song, which is a Black-led organization that works on reproductive justice largely through reproductive healthcare framework. And the name was, or like the term was coined by a Black woman named Loretta Ross. And again, really important to center the voices of Black individuals who have been extreme contributors to the fight for safe legal abortion across our country, but are some of those who are struggling to access safe legal abortion due to much systemic racism. Though it's a really complicated time in our country, and I understand that this issue becomes particularly difficult as we heard about Amy Coney Barrett's Supreme Court nomination. For a lot of folks, they're left wondering what is next in the status, particularly of abortion rights. And so this is a video I saw in 2018 when I went to Planned Parenthood's national conference that really inspired me. It's very short. I would like to share it with you so that hopefully we can continue to move forward with some something that like will energize us, because again, I understand this topic can be really dense. So I'm going to stop my screen share really quick to take it off of present mode. Or maybe I shouldn't have done that. Let's see. Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry.
You're good, Maggie.
I am so, oh, I wonder if it's just gonna, let's see, go to Google Slides. Okay, cool. Okay, cool, we're on it. So I'm gonna play this video really quick.
Put on your face, know your place. My choice. Shut up and smile. I could do
One of us can be dismissed, two of us can be ignored, but together we are a movement and we are unstoppable.
Cause no one knows me, no one ever will. If I don't say something, take that dry blue pill. They may see that monster, they may run away, but I have to do this. I can't keep quiet. No.
Rome became the first openly transgender person.
Democrat Monka Dingra.
She's making history as the first African-American
First Latino woman.
Just listen to this crowd as they erupt.
Me Too is a movement to radicalize the notion of mass healing. Some of us start by telling our stories.
Know that the woman's movement is something real. It's our today. And more than today, it's our tomorrow.
And this is a day that will change us forever because we are together.
Awesome. I hope that video motivated you in the same ways it sometimes motivates me. Oh no, we don't want to watch it again though. Let's see. So in that video, you see a range of different folks. And so we know that there's like no one person who fits the mold of like who has an abortion. And we need to continue to move ourselves past using like feminized language. You'll see a lot of the studies I draw upon do use feminized language, largely because those are how those folks self-report. But transgender men, non-binary folks, cisgender women, agender individuals, two-spirit Montanans, everybody has abortions like who belong to demographics whose bodies will allow them. 24% of those who have abortions identify as Catholic, 13% evangelicals, 24% had been using contraceptives, 59% identify themselves as mothers, more than half of them are in their 20s. And so I hope that throughout this presentation, you can try to challenge yourself like against the typical like model or norm of who has an abortion. Okay, and so this briefly is abortion rates in Montana. So there's sort of a lapse in data here, but as you can see, people are having less abortions than they have in the past, and that follows a national trend, and we'll talk a little bit more about why that is. I think it's particularly interesting that 9 to 14% of abortions that occur in the state of Montana are actually like performed on non-residents. And I think a large reason for that is because we live in a region where abortion access is not just an issue in Montana, but in the Dakotas and Wyoming and Idaho. So we have folks traveling. So that makes sense, but abortion rates are steadily declining, not because abortion is a bad thing, but because other types of healthcare have expanded, and we'll talk again, more about that. So in 1973, we secured the right to safe legal abortion through Roe versus Wade. The woman who you see here on the left is Norma McCorvey. She was the original plaintiff. She was a low-income Texas woman. She was like a house cleaner. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that she was a queer person, and that's often left out of the narrative. Queer people certainly do have abortions. And Norma McCorvey was denied that access in the state of Texas. And her story is really powerful and important. And again, I just want to call it into existence because a lot of people just don't know the origins of who was Jane Roe, the anonymous plaintiff. So actually, good news, Montana's constitution provides stronger protections for safe legal abortion than the United States Constitution. So we've been looking at maps. A lot of us have been wondering with Amy Coney Barrett's nomination to the Supreme Court, what will happen to safe legal abortion? And so the case that is most critical that I have pulled up there in bold is Jeanette versus Ellery. And so that case struck down limits that the state had tried to set up that for the state to get involved in terms of funding, that there would have to be rape, incest, or endangerment to the person who was having the abortion. The Montana Supreme Court overturned that decision, and that was huge. That was really huge. Previously, was something that the Supreme Court had upheld, and so we saw time and time again, though, however, through Armstrong versus State, that's another one that the Supreme Court thought the Montana Supreme Court would never be able to touch, that stopped the undue burden that it was creating to not allow physician's assistants to perform abortions. That folks in Montana felt like that created an access barrier. The Supreme Court said, you're probably not going to win it, but we won. Wicklund versus State, you'll hear the name Wicklund come up quite a few times throughout this. That stopped like a judicial waiver in terms of young people who are under the age of 18 having to get consent from a guardian. And then the last one, Planned Parenthood of Missoula versus the state, that stopped a really unfortunate 24-hour window that was trying to be created between the time somebody went in for counseling prior to an abortion to the time that they could complete it. That's just an unnecessary barrier that unfortunately thousands and thousands of people endure in other states whose Supreme Courts do not protect them. So no matter what happens with the US Supreme Court, Montanans are relatively protected beyond Roe versus Wade. So general abortion access in the Treasure State, this is a timeline of clinics in Montana. You'll see in 1982, there were 20 clinics established in Montana. By 92, there were 12 abortion clinics. In 2011, there were 8 abortion providers statewide, 7 of which were clinics. 2014, there are only 5 clinics left. And then in 2017, 93% of Montana counties had no clinics that provided abortions, and 56% of those Montana women lived in those counties. That is an extreme access barrier, and we'll talk more about why that is. But I just want to call it out that that is much higher than the national average in terms of the number of people living in a county without abortion access. And I'd also like to draw attention, in 2014, when we had 5 clinics, there was a time, we still have 5 clinics, but between now and 2014, we dropped down to 4 when there was clinic violence against a clinic in Kalispell, which I'll talk more about violence against Montana clinics later, but that's, really drastic. So there are actually more crisis pregnancy centers in Montana than there are abortion providers. Crisis pregnancy centers are intentionally deceptive and don't provide safe legal abortion or honestly any real accurate medical care. And they take advantage of people in states everywhere, but in states like Montana where it's really hard to come by an abortion. And so it's really hard to find those resources. And so they prey on people who may be misinformed or in a really vulnerable spot. There are 14 in Montana, and there are presently 5 abortion providers. So these are some signs you're at a crisis pregnancy center. So often their advertisements address your fears, insecurities, and helplessness instead of giving you direct information. They do outreach in low-income neighborhoods or on campus. CareNet is one here in Missoula, and they are often doing outreach on our campus. They won't tell you if they actually offer abortion care, but they make abortion sound unsafe, violent, scary, and they will use images of infants, sometimes religious references, or the word hope. And one of the main tactics that these facilities operate with is shame and misinformation. Some are licensed to provide ultrasounds, and they'll either lie to women and tell them that they're not as far along as they actually are, so they think they have more time to decide if they would like to have an abortion or not, or they'll tell them that they are further along than they are because they do not want them to believe that they can access an abortion. And that is really upsetting and scary. And it happens right here in our neighborhood. And a lot of these facilities, unfortunately, are able to access Title X funding from the federal government. And so it's really concerning because this is not right medical information or help. So why the decline in clinics? There has been a nationwide decline in clinics. Until recent Medicaid expansion, Montana's Medicaid program only covered medically necessary abortion. So a doctor would have to say, this gestation is not viable, this will do harm to the person carrying it, etc. And so without any sort of way to ensure that they were continually going to get paid, a lot of clinics in Montana and across the country have had to shutter because they can't afford to keep their doors open. Susan Wicklund was a really key provider of abortion in Montana, and with her retirement came the closure of a clinic in Livingston. So now there's no clinic even remotely close to Gallatin County, which is huge. And then violence against clinics, and we'll go through a timeline of that as well. So this is a lot of information about national clinic closure trends and Medicaid. So at first we saw that, right, folks are having less abortions, but that doesn't mean we should shut down clinics. So the reason why abortion is happening less is because there's an availability of birth control, due to healthcare policy under the Obama administration. Not only could more people access birth control, but could access birth control that was right for them. And then there are states that have legislatures that are particularly unfriendly to abortion. And so they create really strange policies like rooms where abortions are performed have to be X amount of square feet, or the hallway has to be like this wide. And so a lot of clinics can't keep up with the necessity to renovate when they can hardly afford to keep their doors open. And so a lot of these closures occurred before Medicaid was able to provide like unequivocal access in the first trimester to abortion. So we can assume it was largely in part of finances. And clinics, though, going forward should have some better financial security through Medicaid expansion. It is concerning, though, with the 2019 gag rule that prevents any clinic from receiving that federal funding should they provide abortion services, even if it's not for abortion. If they can make recommendations or referrals for abortion, they can't get federal funding. And so that's kind of scary because that is something that a lot of these clinics also use, so not just state funding. So this is Dr. Susan Wicklund. She is someone I mentioned earlier, and she recently retired in 2013. She opened the Mountain Country Women's Clinic in Bozeman, Montana in 93. For a very long time. She was one of the only abortion providers in this region that she would travel to states where there was nobody to provide abortion, like the Dakotas, sometimes areas of Wisconsin, Wyoming. And so she was really dedicated not only to the doing of the work, but the ethics of the work. And she was actually fired from a clinic in St. Paul because she treated someone who could not pay. Her mother became sick and she had to close her clinic down, and then she eventually reopened it in Livingston, so right outside of Bozeman. And again, she had to close it down in 2013. It was time for her to retire and take care of her own self, which meant the loss of a clinic. But Susan Wicklund really paved the way for abortion access in Montana and in this region, and in her honor has been created the Susan Wicklund Abortion Access Fund. So for those who, if their insurance doesn't cover abortion, if they have to drive 200 miles and need a place to stay for the night, etc., there is a fund in her honor and in her name that folks can apply for. So another thing I brought up was violence against Montana clinics and how that has impacted the function of clinics in Montana. This is really upsetting to see. So in 92, there was arson at Planned Parenthood in Helena. The worst of all of the arson attacks was certainly in Missoula at Blue Mountain Clinic, which is a full family practice, which is so upsetting because that didn't just mean the loss of abortion care for so many people, but the loss of like children seeing their doctors too, which is really sad. And then again in Kalispell in 94. And so they ended up charging a man named Richard T. Andrews. He committed a series of arson against clinics over years and years and years in California, Montana, Idaho, and Wyoming. And when they caught him, they think he was on his way to commit another act of arson at a clinic in Portland, Oregon. He was affiliated with this huge group called Operation Rescue and the Winnetachee Christian Coalition for Public Policy. And this just goes to show that so often we think of these people as like maybe these fringe people who are outside of the norm, who aren't really connected to any group. And sometimes that is the way, but he was directly connected to that group. And that's really sort of alarming. We can see so quickly how things can go from the margins to the mainstream. And his tactic of arson was really devastating. And so then in 2013, we can talk about, so Susan Wicklund, until she retired, she and her daughter were harassed. She wore a bulletproof vest. She carried a firearm. She had a guard dog. She disguised herself with wigs and makeup because she was so heavily harassed for providing abortion in this region. And one of her biggest opponents actually faced felony charges for harassment and was incarcerated for it, just to show the climate and the hostility of reproductive freedom in this region. And then in 2014, this is the most recent act of violence against a Montana clinic. Zachary Clunt broke in and completely vandalized All Families Healthcare in Kalispell, which was really devastating. He used chemicals and all sorts of things, like ruined all of their medical equipment. And at first he said it was in a search for prescription drugs, but then it was revealed that his mom was on the board of Hope Pregnancy Ministries, and which is a crisis pregnancy center. And he had texted his mother previously, right before he committed this violent attack, about his feelings of anti-choice. And so that was really upsetting. And Dr. Cahill, who had devoted her whole life really to this clinic, rebuilt, and now All Families Healthcare is based in Whitefish. And the resilience of our state and leaders in our state like Dr. Cahill, Dr. Wicklund, is really powerful to see, but really upsetting at the same time. Okay, so we'll talk about where clinics are and aren't. So believe it or not, there's no clinic in Bozeman, only Billings, Great Falls, Helena, Missoula, and Whitefish. And so those are the only places you can go to have a surgical abortion. And then there are telehealth care options through organizations like Planned Parenthood to allow people to access a medical abortion, which is a series of 2 pills. However, those even then aren't always accessible, again, because of costs. That takes longer than a couple hours in a clinic. And people who may be in an abusive relationship, who don't have a safe space to have an abortion at home, that's not accessible to them. So on Montana's staffing reservation, in part due to restrictions from the Hyde Amendment, there are no abortion providers. IHS is Indian Health Services, which is connected inherently to the federal government, receives funding from the federal government, stopping the allowance of abortions provided through IHS. So Montana, as I said earlier, is above the national average of those who can become pregnant who don't have access to a clinic in their county. People in Montana are regularly driving nearly 200 miles for safe legal abortions. If we're going to talk about distance and talk about Montana's reservations, especially with the loss of all families healthcare for a couple years there, the distance from a place like Browning to Missoula is astronomical. And then on a national average, people drive 11 miles to access abortion, but Montanans average a 30-mile drive. So the Hyde Amendment was passed in 1976, and that prevented any federal funding from covering abortion. And I mentioned it earlier with IHS, but here are some other examples. So Indian Health Services, again, abortions can't be provided through them. Abortion is not covered for the insurance from federal employees because of that federal government money, for people in the military, for Peace Corps volunteers. And interestingly enough, that's like a big portion of Montana's population, or those who use IHS. We have a really high rate of Peace Corps placement and a really high service member and veteran population. Not unfortunately, but unfortunately for them, that they cannot access maybe the healthcare that they really need through the healthcare means that they have. So these are some key leaders in the anti-choice movement. You may or may not be familiar with this individual. If you live in the Flathead Valley, you may know her, but Annie Bukchak is the president of the Montana Pro-Life Coalition, which you'll see often these groups do not follow the rules, and she was recently sued by the COPP, which is the Commissioner of Political Practices in Montana. Annie Bukchak is a physician, and she really weaponizes that status to really gear people up and get them riled up. And I think that is really what makes her so dangerous. A lot of people may know her because she went viral this April for COVID denial. She made this COVID video that went viral, and unfortunately, because she's a doctor, a lot of people felt like they could trust her. And she's such a good example of, like, these aren't just fringe people. She was recently appointed to the Flathead County Health Board in January this year, and she has used that to incite violence and unrest. And so it's so easy for us to think about, like, these people are different and they're out there and we don't have to deal with them, but they acquiesce to positions of power and are determining a lot for us. We got to do something about it. And so another key leader in the movement is the Montana Family Foundation. They're very sneaky. It's hard to get information on them unless you join them. They partner with a national group called the Alliance Defending Freedom and the Family Research Council, which those two groups are not only in the game of anti-choice, they are in the game of anti-trans, anti-immigrant, anti-public schools. And so that is really scary. And Annie Bukchak is a little bit different. Her ability to incite, I think, lies more with sort of people in like a social movement setting, whereas the Montana Family Foundation engages with the legislature big time. They're financially supported by Greg Gianforte. He's donated $2 million to this foundation. And they're headquartered in Laurel, Montana. $2 million is a lot of money, and that's not the only place they're getting it. So it's scary to think about the possibilities of what can happen when people try to buy our freedom and our health. So there has been copious amounts of anti-choice legislation in the Montana State Legislature throughout the years. These are just a couple examples. Often they're ridiculous, and I used summaries of these bills from reputable, trusted organizations that do a good job summing them up, but they often include really gnarly language that is medically inaccurate and is meant to make people squirm and then make them cringe and make them feel afraid. And thankfully, because of Governor Bullock, these have all been vetoed, and most of the anti-choice legislation that has passed has been vetoed by Governor Bullock. It is particularly concerning, I think, due to Greg Gianforte's race, and the amount of money that he has donated to the Montana Family Foundation. So to see what would happen if he were to win this race, and his connection to that group, I think we know that a lot of legislation might not be vetoed in the same way that Governor Bullock has really committed himself to. Okay, and so we'll talk about what's next. We have seen in Montana ebbs and flows. There are years in the legislature where abortion is a hot topic, and it's like the main mission of a lot of legislators. That's why they want to get in there. They want to do anything they can to make access to abortion limited in our state. But there are other times where they are more focused on other issues regarding like marginalized groups or disadvantaging other people. So it feels like every couple of years they'll pick a new group or a new issue. And so I particularly feel a lot of concern that we will see a rise in anti-choice legislation this session. This is a legislative session year, just because I think that Amy Coney Barrett's nomination to the Supreme Court will empower a lot of people. And people get fired up during election years. I think that no matter who wins the race for the United States president, like, people will be fired up enough to maybe start poking at this issue again in the legislature. And we've also seen in other states that COVID was really used as a scapegoat for a reason to limit access to safe legal abortion as if it were not medically necessary. We know that abortion is a routine medical procedure. It's safer than most dental surgeries, but we're not seeing restrictions on dental surgeries during COVID. This is just something that a lot of legislators felt like they could take advantage of what was going on in the world. And so what's next? I feel that we need to vote. I feel that we need to get involved with cool organizations who do some bill tracking. I think the Montana Human Rights Network is a wonderful group that does really intensive work in the legislature and tracks really well, and to engage. So when you hear from groups like the Montana Human Rights Network or Planned Parenthood, like Advocates of Montana, that something's going on in the legislature, it can be so easy to feel so powerless. But just to know that there are people who would like to support you in ways to engage, so contacting your representatives, making some noise outside local offices, if it's a federal issue, etc. But we are in a good place in Montana regardless of what happens. There will just continue to, it will be an uphill battle. And so here are some resources that I would like to highlight. I know that we all might come from different places. If you're a person who's like, I need help accessing an abortion, something like the Susan Wicklund Fund or Indigenous Women Rising, which provides, it's an abortion fund that provides money specifically to Indigenous women seeking abortion, that might be for you. But if you're a person who's riled up and looking to give, these are also resources for you. Planned Parenthood of Missoula, of Montana, is a great place to give or to get information about reproductive justice. The YWCA is also there. And so that is what I have for those. And so I just want to remind you before I stop talking and maybe take some questions that most Americans and most Montanans are pro-choice. And I think it can feel so scary right now, and especially in a state that historically the messaging is that this is not the way it is. Just to know that, like, you are in the majority if you are a pro-choice Montanan, and that our courts have proven that as well. So I would love to answer any questions, should there be any. So if anyone has any questions, I would love to answer them.